Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. Apologies for a slight delay there. There was technical gremlins and difficulties, but we are here on the Saturday morning like usual, giving you your deadline stream to help you with any information, any injury news that you may have. But before we get into it, Ben, how are you doing today?
Well, the technical gremlins were on my side. So another Windows update, which has kicked in and then took all of my internet off, changed all the settings around. And yeah, look, over that, looking forward to Gameweek 7, looking forward to going into this international break on a high with a good, big, fat, green arrow. Yeah, so looking forward to the stream. Let's see who's about this morning. Looking forward to answering those questions.
Yeah, and the thing is, just before we get into it, those Microsoft updates, they're like the bane of our lives. They've ruined so many bits of work, Zoom calls, whatever. So I don't know if somebody from Microsoft is listening. Please stop doing those. But let's get into the questions then. This is why we're doing it. And Renos Stelliano has asked, any news for Luke Shaw?
Luke Shaw has been training on the pitches. There were issues with illness and an ongoing shoulder problem, which is a carryover from his Euros. The shoulder issue isn't a massive concern for me. Like I say, he's managed to play all of those games since the beginning of the season with that. So that's something which we'll just have to consider. It was the illness that forced him off last weekend. Ollie said that he was making much better. He was making improvements. Now, of course, the performance of Alex Talas midweek and that goal sort of muddy the waters. And that means that maybe Luke Shaw, if he isn't 100%, then Ollie may decide to go with either Talas as a more attacking left back or Dalot as possibly a more defensive thing. For me, I think Shaw just gets the nod. I think that rest midweek and the fact that he's been training and he is first choice. So, you know, I'm a good 75 to 80% sure at this point that Shaw will get the nod in the early kickoff.
Yeah, and the thing is, as well as I fancy Man United so much more if he is playing in the side. I watched Dalot play. He wasn't very good in that position. That there was just not the wideness at the front that causes other teams problems. So there really was a totally different style of play. And we've seen a kind of come down in the last couple of games as well with Manchester United as well. They haven't been outstanding like they first were when Ronaldo started. He's still ticking over fairly nicely, but even he was starved of a few opportunities. So it's definitely one to watch. And I think maybe today's game might be informative as to whether to keep him over the international break. So Abby James has kind of explained exactly what you have there. He's given some of the quotes, so that's very nice and useful for other listeners. But Gareth Marshall has asked, "Hey up, Ben." I'm not going to do a Yorkshire accent.
Hey up, lad.
Yeah. I've had a busy week and haven't followed the presses at all. I'm ready for this. Let's go. I mean, is there any big news from the presses that Gareth Marshall should know?
Well, I mean, if you want a condensed version of all of the press conference and players' news, do you always check out Ben 10 or, as it was yesterday, Ben 12? Because there was so much going on, I just couldn't do that in 10 minutes. Some of the headline grabbers, Patrick Bamford, he's ruled out of the game. Hopeful, fingers crossed, that he could come back after the international break. The future for Luke Ayling doesn't look so bright. Marcelo Bielsa said that he's likely to go under the knife. Surgery required on that knee injury that he picked up against Newcastle. We have no timeline for that. Everton were hopeful of maybe Seamus Coleman, Richarlison, Dominic Calvert-Lewin being involved against Manchester United. That certainly isn't going to be the case. Good news for game week 8, though, those three players are all on the training pitches, training away from the main group. So this fortnight, this 2-week period should stand them in good stead. Elsewhere, some of the other big players. So we've got, obviously, we know Trent is out of the top of the table clash against Manchester City. Who will come in at right back? Well, Jurgen Klopp, was very coy on that, as you would expect. We know that James Milner can play in there. There's also Nico Williams, but also Joe Gomez, and potentially, as we covered on a stream earlier in the week, Does he go for a completely different system altogether and reward Konate for his form and maybe go with a back three alongside Joel Matip and Virgil van Dijk? Other big headliners, Kufal, I mean, he's attracting a lot of interest. Missed out midweek because of a groin problem. That is an injury carryover from the Carabao Cup and that tackle by Nemanja Matic in the Crown Jewels. He did play the following weekend, so again, that indicates that he's in a fairly strong position to be involved. I'm just going down your list here. For Leicester, if you were thinking about some of their assets, it looks like Johnny Evans is going to miss out. Obviously, we know there's an ongoing foot issue there, plus also illness kept him out of the game midweek in Leisure Warsaw. For Newcastle, clean bill of health. Wolves, Watford, Chelsea. I think that's the other big headliner. Mason Mount returns for the Blues. N'Golo Kante is sidelined due to COVID. And just a quick update on Reece James, because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with regards to this. Gareth Southgate came out on Thursday and said that he had included Reece James in the Chelsea squad, as he was fairly confident that he would actually be included in the matchday squad this weekend. Thomas Tuchel dealt with that with a straight bat, and he said, look, the only way he's going to be playing for England over the break if that's in the water polo team, because Reece James is currently rehabbing in the swimming pool at the moment with his ankles, so there's absolutely zero chance there. Now, talk about who will actually come into that Chelsea team. Went for Azpilicueta on the right-hand side of midfield, as it were, initially. But it could be that Thiago Silva drops out of that back line. We've got Rudiger in there, Christensen, Azpilicueta, and maybe Hudson-Odoi on that right-hand side. So maybe a good one-week punt, because I know a lot of people out there are thinking about pulling their trigger on the wild card ahead of game week 8.
Yeah, and just to remind people, I've put it in the comments as well. Do hit the subscribe button, because, like you said there, that is the usual Ben in 10 video. But obviously you don't get this banter and back forth between the two of us, because you just ride it solo and you take one massive big breath at the start of the video and just go for 10 minutes with that one whole breath. It's an amazing piece of art. I don't know how you learn that skill.
Look, I have a lot of practice doing things in one big breath for 10 minutes. Let me assure you.
So let's move it on to St. Louis, or St. Louis's question. Ricardo Pereira, will he play?
Ooh, this is a big question. Ahead of Thursday night's game, and I done my predicted lineup for the hub, and I went with a 3-1-4-2 within that Leicester backline, and that was dependent upon whether Johnny Evans was going to be involved or not. I've seen Soyuncu in there and Vestergaard. Now, the fact that Evans is out could mean that Castagna is into that back three now, which then opens up that place on the right-hand side of that four, which you would see Pereira maybe going head-to-head with Albrighton. I think Pereira just gets the nod, although, as with all of these things, there's in such a bad run of form. I think Brendan Rodgers is really clutching at straws about how to get his team motivated and starting and firing and winning games again. So, look, I'm a 75% chance on Ricardo. I'm hoping that, Albrighton doesn't come in at that minuscule little 25.
Let's move it on to Neil Shah's question. He says, hi, Jason, Ben. Any clarity on whether TAA will return after the international break? He's got another one there, but we'll start off with that one.
So when the incident first happened, which was on the eve of the Champions League match midweek in Porto, Klopp was very guarded with the update that he provided. And again, we covered that in the video. He didn't dismiss the possibility of Trent featuring against City. On Thursday, he actually confirmed that he was out. Now, as with any soft tissue or muscular problem, look, it's never set in stone in terms of a return to play. But what we do know, it's a very mild, light, slight strain at grade 1. So ordinarily, you would expect a return within 7 to 14 days. So that stands Trent in very good stead. You're hoping that there isn't any kind of reaction, any kind of setback on the training pitches. If not, then, we fully expect him to be involved.
Superstar Diver has asked thoughts on Kufal.
Yeah, look, I just touched on it as part of my sort of quick Ben 10 update. As far as I'm aware, Kufal is managing that injury from the Carabao Cup, from his coming together with Nemanja Matic. That was more of an impact injury. Yes, it's painful, but he did play the following weekend, and he was held out as a precaution, maybe, of being managed for the West Ham Europa League tie against Rapid Vienna. David Moyes was very non-committal on saying whether Kufal would be involved, but he did say that it wasn't bad and he was fairly confident that he could make the squad, and indeed, I think he will.
And so Abby James has asked the same question that Neil Shah has as well. What is your opinion on Alonso? Because Neil Shah wanted to know, on the Chelsea front, will Chilwell take Alonso's spot in the team anytime soon?
Look, I know there's a lot of talk within the community on Twitter, certainly, that they have Ben Chilwell as a starter for Chelsea. And that's probably off the back of the fact that Marcus Alonso came off, I think it was at half time in Turin against Juventus. Now, for me, it's still Marcus Alonso's position to lose. Ben Chilwell has had very few minutes this season. In fact, he's had very few minutes since last season, despite going away with England in the Euros. So in terms of that actual sharpness and that fitness, it just isn't there. And of course, he will need to build that up and get himself in the position where he's able to start. But for me, I just think Marcus Alonso deserves to keep that shirt. And I've actually went for him to start this game as opposed to maybe Tuchel taking him out of Turin because it was a performance issue. I just felt as if it was maybe an opportunity to rest him and give those minutes to Chilwell. Undoubtedly a quality player. In long term, I think Chilwell still is the number one. But for now, you cannot argue with the start of the season Marcus Alonso's had. Is he a player that I'd be looking to bring in? Maybe not. If I was an owner, I would sit tight and take a gamble. But look, we know that Tuchel will rotate heavily in certain games. So Marcus Alonso isn't a player that I'd want to be risking a transfer on at this point.
Let's move to Parafa Banji has asked the same question there, so I hope that answers it for you as well. Gareth Marshall has asked another question. Sorry, it wasn't much of a question. What about Rafinha? Gareth, you can ask anything and everything. That's why we've got these deadline streams, so don't worry about it. But yes, Ben, what's the situation with Rafinha? I'm an owner as well.
Yeah, so Rafinha is fit and available, or fit in the loosest sense. He will start and he will play for Leeds. We know he is managing an ongoing hip complaint that forced him off, reduced these minutes against Newcastle and also against West Ham last weekend. Indeed, it was the player himself that asked Marcelo Bielsa, could I be replaced in and around that 70th minute mark? It seems to be once that fatigue starts to kick in, the sort of pain threshold, or it needs to be managed a little bit more carefully. So am I confident Rafinha playing 90 minutes? Absolutely not. But will he start and will he get 60 to 70, 75 minutes? That I'm fairly certain of. And we know just from the last two games, those 60 or 70 minutes is all he needs for the Brazilian to grab a goal.
I don't want to put you on the spot like we did with Raj midweek, and he actually dropped out. He couldn't take the heat. No. In terms of it, people do check out that video though with Raj. Fantastic insight into a lot. I mean, it's great as always. We got him on every week, and this time it was a live stream. I think we might be doing another live stream over the international break just for everybody to get their questions in. It really is like a special opportunity for me to chat to two of the greatest minds in injury analysis. And I know you don't like me saying that, Ben, because you're very humble in terms of that. You don't actually like people calling you an injury expert. But in terms of Rafinha and the like who might be going on the international break abroad to red list countries, what is the latest update with that?
So, so as we suspected, there is agreement in place with the UK government and the Premier League. Ultimately, players can travel to red list countries and return without quarantine in a bigger sense if they're double jabbed. So what that essentially means is if they do travel away to South America and they're double jabbed, they can come back and they can play for their respective clubs. However, there is a slight caveat. It doesn't really impact massively on the players and their availability, but they will have to quarantine away from their normal home environment. And it's not at one of those quarantine hotels. They're allowed to sort of pick and choose, but they still can't have any visitors. Meals need to be dropped off at the hotel door. So there will be strict guidelines in and around that. They will have to remain within that bubble of that football environment. But in essence, if they're double jabbed and they go to a red list and they come back, they are free to play. Now, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that me and Jason will get an opportunity to sit down and cover everything with regards to which players are going away, the potential impact on the clubs, and again, just clarifying what those quarantine guidelines are for this international break. And that's maybe we could do something either on maybe either later today, Sunday, or even first thing on Monday to give FPL managers a bit of a heads up and an understanding of what's going to happen for those players over the break.
I mean, let us know in the comment section, everybody. If you want a video like that, do let us know, because that what you guys do and respond to our videos really helps us with how we shape our content as well. And I was just going to say there, you know, for some footballers, they might enjoy having to quarantine away from the family. It might actually be they might want to be called up for international duty just that they can miss a week or two away from them. But it'll be an interesting one with that, because there's no way of knowing which footballers have been double jabbed. So in one sense, we might be more likely to see more players, but in the other sense, it's all guesswork still. So it really doesn't clear up that situation at all.
I mean, what I would say, Jason, we have to be careful, or our clubs have to manage that dissemination of information, particularly sensitive, confidential information,
of course,
and whether, you know, in and around that. But we have had some insights from managers. Dean Smith, for example, has come out and he said, look, if the players go away, there won't be any issues whatsoever. You know, so that implies that Emi Martinez, Emi Buendia will be fine. There are also one or two other managers who've come out. I think Brendan Rodgers was something that referenced that as well. So I have actually got a bit of a crib list of all of those little bits of comments and quotes to try and piece together where we are, to try and understand you know, where players are. So although we may not know if players are double jabbed for certain, we're hopefully reading between the lines with those managers' comments and being able to give an overall view and a flavour of how that may impact a certain team.
That is Detective Dinnery once again. Brilliant work there. So we might be releasing that video at some point very soon. Babe Hero has asked about Luke Shaw again. We did discuss that at the top of the show. I mean, just I guess quickly again, because a few people have asked again. It's not clear, is it, if he will 100% play?
This is, when we talk about return to play decision, it's never black and white, first and foremost. So just because Luke Shaw has been training doesn't necessarily mean that he comes straight back into the squad. So, and that's the situation that we're currently dealing with. He has worked. Ollie said he's much better, but other factors to consider. Just because he trained yesterday, you don't know if there's been any kind of overnight reaction. You know, he might be feeling extremely fatigued. We don't know the exact illness. If it was a touch of flu, then maybe that could affect him a little bit more. We also then consider the performance of Alex Telles midweek and his goal against Villarreal. So that's something for Ollie to think about. So, you know, he's managing a squad here, and it's difficult. So that's why I'm always a little bit reluctant to give a definitive answer on a player potentially starting. Do I think Luke Shaw will be in the squad? I think he has a very, very good chance, because he seems to be over the worst of it as of Friday. But, you know, it's in the Premier League where small percentages matter massively. In big games, this early kickoff on the television, there's a little bit of pressure being built up at Old Trafford. Ollie can't afford to take any chances with players who are maybe, not only 75 or 80%, but maybe even a player who's not 90%. And you've got those players on the sidelines who are champing at the bit to get on. They want to prove themselves. So you need to consider those factors as well. But in terms of the shoulder and the illness, he's in a good place at the moment, Luke Shaw.
Let's move it to, Gareth Marshall has just said, thanks for the nice condensed overview, Ben. And just to remind people one more time, that Ben 10 or Ben in 12 or Ben in 15 is there every Friday, or whichever day the game week is the day before. So if it starts on a Friday, it'll be Thursday. It really is fantastic how much you can fit into there. Anat Argawal has asked again about the Luke Shaw update, so I hope that kind of settles it for everybody. Renos Stilianou has asked a great question about our opinions on the captaincy selection for this game week. This is something that we have discussed in a few videos, but Lukaku or CR7 for captaincy selection?
We discussed this on our captaincy video, didn't we? Jason, yes. and those two players. Look, I think I was Camp Blue. I went with Lukaku. Yes, Southampton have been improved of late, but I think the return of Mason Mount and the fact that Lukaku maybe hasn't been firing on all, or certainly not getting the goals in the last couple of games. Chelsea will want to go into the break on a high. Back-to-back defeats. Let's not read too much into that. We're talking about Manchester City and Juventus and Turin here. So I'm in Camp Blue, Lukaku.
Well, for me, I have to have CR7 in terms of the debate between those two. But I'm not too settled on either of the choices, right? Southampton have a good record against Chelsea, I think, since 2017. They've only lost once or something. I don't pay too much attention to history like that. So I'm looking at this season. Southampton have done well. Chelsea have been good but not brilliant in the last few games, and they've had 2 losses. I don't know if I'm dampening it too much, if that goes against, logic and everything. But then let's throw in the data, because that's my role. I'm the data guy. And if you look at Lukaku, he has the higher projected points for this game week, and he has a 63% chance of any return this game week. And I think he's got a 73% chance of a goal. So he can have a goal or an assist for 63%, and it's quite a high chance as well there in terms of getting a goal. And then you move to Ronaldo. He has slightly lower kind of stats, 5.9 projected points, 61% of any kind of return. So there's not too much between them, and I guess it's kind of who you prefer. I always don't like to go for the early kickoff one as well. You and I discussed this again in the captaincy video, because if it doesn't go well, it kind of ruins your whole game week and you have squeaky bum time for the rest of the game week. But then on the flip side, if you start the game week off brilliantly for that starting 12:30 kickoff between Man United and Everton, you're laughing. You're relaxed, you're ahead of the pack and everybody else, and you might start, going really ahead and having green arrows if Lukaku doesn't do well. So for me, it's a really tough choice. I have to go with Ronaldo, but the data would kind of suggest that Lukaku has it more, but I'm really not settled on either of them. I don't think it's as brilliant as people make it out for either of them. And we discussed as well, Salah versus Man City, it's very rarely goalless between those two. He might be worth consideration, Ben.
Look, I fancy a high-scoring draw. I think it could be a 2-2. If it's Lukaku, if it's Salah, I own both. I'm looking forward to it. Salah is a guy that just keeps on producing those numbers. He has to be up there and considered and talked about with the likes of the Ronaldos, the Messis on a world scale, because of what he's done consistently, year on year, season on season, week on week, game by game. The guy is a phenomenal talent, like I say, maybe he doesn't come with the bells and whistles of the others. I don't know why that's the case. It may be that once Salah leaves Liverpool, leaves the Premier League, retires, people will look at his numbers and take a step back and go, wow, we were privileged to see one of the Premier League's greatest ever talents. And for me, when you are that good, you're able to transcend fixtures. You're able to create opportunities against anybody, regardless of who it is, and being City. So, it only takes a split second to go, and he's on set pieces or penalties. So I think Salah's another good option as well.
Yeah, Salah is a great option always. And this is the thing, Man City, Liverpool, as I said, rarely kind of is a 0-0. And usually both sides score. The last time that one of them didn't score was the 4-0 win of Man City over Liverpool in the Project Restart era. And we know that the kind of problems that Liverpool had there. Different story now, different kind of team. That they've got so much better mentality.
What was the problem? That they're still half cut from winning the league? I think the fact that they had just left the champagne in the dressing room and went straight out on the pitch might have had some kind of impact on that performance. But we digress and we move on.
We put no official comments on that, I would say, Ben. So let's move it to Anthony Marimi's question. Captain a Chelsea defender. I think that's a very bold maverick, but I love it.
Are you asking, or are you wanting a suggestion? If I looked at that back line, I think the safest player that I would go for this week would be Cesar Azpilicueta. I think Thiago Silva could be out after his 90 minutes midweek. We know people are talking about the Chilwell Alonso. I do think it's Alonso, but it's not something that I would be happy to take a punt on. We know what Azpilicueta, he can go on the right-hand side of that four if Hudson-Odoi doesn't play there in with Reece James sidelined, or Azpilicueta could come into that back line as a 3 with Rudiger and Christensen. So I think for me, it's got to be Azpilicueta.
Yeah, I love Azpilicueta as well. Since the kind of injury to Reece James, I think that he does have that possibility of starting a little bit further up. But he is the captain. I think he's one of the most secure in there because he is the captain. And he's just absolutely brilliant as a player. I think sometimes, we're talking about best players in terms of Mo Salah in the Premier League era. But Azpilicueta, he's just been Mr. Consistent for so long at Chelsea. So I think that, he's got to be regarded as one of the all-time greats in terms of defenders and everything. Let's move it to the next question, though. Just to surmise, I like the idea of captaining a Chelsea defender because I think the clean sheet is very likely. Southampton have been very poor in front of goal. To just add context to that, they have a 7.09 XG so far this season, but only 4 goals scored. So they've been underperforming that. And looking at the way that they play as well in some of these games, Armstrong has been making good runs. He's stretched defences. And I don't know how Redmond is still playing. He's been absolutely awful so far this season. Neil Shah has asked, though, how about an armband on Antonio versus Brentford?
Certainly not adverse to that. There was slightly worrying signs on Thursday evening against Rapid Vienna when it looked as if Antonio was limping towards the end of that first half. Owners, thinking the worst fears come to fruition, but he was cleared and he came off in and around that hour-long mark. We know Brentford have started really well. Defensive data has been fantastic, and they faced their first big 6 test against Liverpool last weekend. Passed with flying colours. What a great game. Maybe a little bit unfortunate not to get more than a point, but conceded 3 goals. And for the first time this season, maybe looked a little bit shaky at the back. How much of that came about because Ethan Pinnock went off injured? I'm not certain, but Pinnock has been past fit. But look, I think as an attacking, an offensive unit, West Ham have been brilliant. It's a derby. So it's going to be a big occasion for both teams. And I was expecting a pretty tight game. But you think, if West Ham are going to get on the score sheet, then Antonio isn't going to be too far away. His numbers, the data has been fantastic, and that I think he's had 10 direct goal contributions this season across all competitions. No player has scored more. He's on a par there with Mo Salah, and he's actually played far fewer minutes. So if I'm right off the top of my head, this, by the way, I think Mikel Antonio has had a goal involvement 1 in every 59 minutes, whereas Mo Salah is 1 in every 67 minutes across all competitions. So the guy is bang in form.
Yeah, and in terms of the Premier League's XG, XGI, he's got the second most, just behind the man himself, Mr. Mo Salah. He's got the second highest XG as well. He's just been phenomenal this season. He's a chance scorer, he's a chance creator, and we've seen how brilliant he is with his team. We saw that fantastic assist that he gave in the Europa League as well, kind of chesting it and creating an opportunity for Declan Rice to then put it into the back of the net. So he's looking great. And let's move it though to the next question. Just quickly to surmise the last little bits of data in terms of that. Antonio has a 54% chance of a return and projected points of 5.2%. So still puts him up there, not as high as the Lukaku one. Just to correct myself as well, Lukaku has a 56% chance scoring, not 73. It was a 71% chance of winning. So not to confuse people there. The next question is from Tiger Sports HD. He's asked, or they've asked, start Mbeumo or Cody?
You're asking me to go against my boys. If you want me to go with Cody, of course, Newcastle travelled down to Molineux, and arguably on the back of one of their best performances of the season at Vicarage Road, very unlucky not to leave there with 3 points. I'm not convinced with Wolves anyway. I'm going to roll out another cliche as I do every week. One swallow does not make a summer. And the fact that, Wolves had a decent result last weekend, we hope that Raul Jimenez can use that as a platform to kick on, just because it's football and because of the nature of the injury that he had. But look, Newcastle away from their home support, away from the pressures of that crowd and Steve Bruce. Like I say, I think they perform a little bit better, and it wouldn't surprise me if Newcastle did score. So therefore, I think it could be a high-scoring game with West Ham and Brentford. An easy 2-2 draw there, similar to the game last week against Liverpool. So Mbeumo would get the nod for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Wolves have just been so poor this season. I fancy Newcastle to score a goal, as bad as the team have been, maybe defensively. Offensively, they're kind of all right, especially Alan Saint-Maxim. And just Wolves, yeah. You wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle actually won against Wolves. They've just been that poor this season. There's a lot of problems there. I don't think Bruno Lage at the moment is showing that he's the guy to turn that team around. Natasha Stubbs has asked, could Antonio be a better choice this week over Lukaku? We've already discussed that, so I hope that we've helped you there, Natasha. Forever QPR has asked a great question here in terms of the cheaper side of the midfielders. Do you start Gray or Smith Rowe?
Big question. Smith Rowe, brilliant performance in the North London derby. Arsenal on the back of 3 consecutive wins, hoping to extend that to 4. So it looks as if Mikel Arteta is beginning to slowly turn things around at Arsenal. And I like Smith Rowe. Now, the thing about Demarai Gray, of course, it's the early kickoff and it's a tough game, but we know that Everton are managing some injury problems. Now, I'm reading between the lines here, and I could be totally off with this one, but Rafa did reference the fact that Abdoul Doucouré could play in a more advanced role. He talked about his high energy. He talked about his engine to get back and forth. And also he mentioned that he'd give him the freedom to go and express himself in that, that final third of the pitch. That got me thinking, there are slight concerns over Alex Iwobi this weekend. And we also seen the return of Gaberman to the Everton training pitches. Now, if Iwobi fails a late fitness test, then I can see Damari Gray moving back out to the left-hand side wing, with Doucouré moving up the pitch and Gaberman maybe sitting in alongside Alan. Now, for me, Gray on that wing doesn't have as much of appeal as when he sits centrally, maybe in behind a Rondon. So in a roundabout way, I'm answering your question, and I'm probably, I'm saying Smith Rowe because I think Damari Gray's impact will be lessened by the fact that Doucouré, if he starts higher up, because Alex Iwobi fails a late fitness test, then Smith Rowe. I hope I haven't lost the point there, but you get the gist. There's a lot of question marks into the rationale and the theory behind that, but that's what I'm thinking.
For some reason, as soon as you said high energy, I had Stott Aitken and Waterman on my mind. Just exactly that kind of stuff. Let me think about with the Gray versus Smith Rowe situation, because I like that Gray is against Manchester United because they've only kept one clean sheet so far this season. They have overperformed a little bit in terms of XG conceded, but they still look so leaky at the back. Whereas Smith Rowe is obviously playing one of the more improved defences this season in Brighton, but they've only kept 2 clean sheets as well. So they're not impenetrable. And we saw how good and how important he is to that Arsenal team. So it's a really tough toss-up. And probably going on the form, you would back Arsenal because they're more in form. They don't have any major injuries, whereas Everton probably do at the moment. Christopher Rayner has asked anything on Marcao.
That was fatigue-related withdrawal last weekend, a touch of cramp, so certainly nothing sinister with regards to that. He is available. I think Wolves could be unchanged for the game against Newcastle.
Let's move to Kevin Burns' question. He says he's thinking Semedo as a differential versus Azpilicueta as safe bet. Have Rudiger and White already. That's a big no from me. I would always back Azpi.
I mean, I'm going with a big fat no as well. I'm just not convinced that Bruno Lage has all his ducks in order down at Wolves. There's this transitional period. They certainly haven't been very pretty on the eye. For me, he still hasn't even nailed down that starting 11. I think we've seen 3 changes last weekend. Trincao, I understood. Adama Traore went out the team, and also Neves with Dendonka, Hee-Chan coming in and Podence. And I think there's still a couple of other places up for grabs in there before we maybe start seeing the best of Wolves. So until that, they're very much on a watch list, and I wouldn't be confident, putting all my eggs in one Wolves basket at the moment.
Yeah, with the data for Azpilicueta versus Semedo as well, if you look at the two, I think so. Semedo has a higher XGI just because he's had a few more shots in the box, but he hasn't done anything with it. But you look at the chances created, and actually Azpilicueta has created more, and he has one big chance created as well. So, you're going with somebody who has a very high chance in Azpilicueta of a clean sheet over somebody who I don't really trust getting a clean sheet. And they're probably about equal for potential goal involvements because Semedo, yes, he's been getting up the field, but he hasn't done anything yet, and it's not amazingly more improved than Azpilicueta. So I think the safer bet is Azpilicueta just because he's got so much more chance. So I think that is the last question there, though, Kevin. I hope that we've helped you and you haven't done that transfer yet. But as always, we say this is just our opinion, just advice. And, if it does pay off for you, then we apologise and we will see you next week. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. We hope that the information has been helpful just before the deadline. We're going to wish you the best of luck with your teams, and we will see you through next week, because we will still be pumping out content through the